Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Hi, my name is Kathleen Simlar, and I am the manager of communications for AARP Michigan. I'm so glad you can be joining us this morning. I want to welcome all of you to our Guard Your Money Banking Fraud event, where we hope to raise the curtain on the latest criminal tactics designed specifically and intentionally to steal your money. I want to thank you for being here. I know we have people watching from across Michigan and the country. So make sure you let us know in the chat where you're watching from. Today is such an important conversation. I honestly don't think a week goes by where I personally don't receive an unsolicited and suspicious text message from someone who's trying to get me to click on a link, and it always makes me pause. During the holidays, I felt like every day I was getting a message about a package that couldn't be delivered due to lack of postage. It looked like it was from the U.S. Postal Service, and they wanted my personal information and my payment information. All these fraud attempts are just overwhelming. I know they're overwhelming for you too. And each and every one of them is designed simply to get your money. So we're going to talk all about that today, most specifically about banking fraud. Today's event is an interactive one, so you, our viewers, are not only invited, but are encouraged to put your questions in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for you to ask our experts your questions and to get the most out of this hour. So what are we talking about in terms of banking fraud? We're talking about check fraud. We're talking about identity theft, bank impersonators, ATM fraud, cryptocurrency fraud, credit card fraud. The list simply goes on, and they're just getting more elaborate every single day. We know that nearly 1/3 of Americans have been victims of financial fraud crime. And I would wager that a good chunk of us today, watching today, have received phishing attempts where the criminals are trying to get our information so they can rob us. It's gotten to the point that I personally am distrustful of everything that comes across my phone, quite frankly. But I'm here to tell you that knowledge is power. And, just remember that knowledge is power. So we've asked our two experts to join us today to shine a light on these kinds of crimes and help all of us navigate our way through it all. And most of all, help us protect our money. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce those experts, including cybersecurity expert Dan Lohrmann, someone I worked with personally at the state of Michigan when he was the state's chief information security officer. Dan is an internationally recognized cybersecurity leader, technologist, keynote speaker, and author. During his distinguished career, he has served global organizations in the public and private sectors in a variety of executive leadership capacities, receiving numerous national awards, including Chief Security Officer of the Year from SC Magazine, Public Official of the Year from Governing Magazine, and the esteemed Computer World Premier List of 100 IT Leaders. Dan currently serves as Field Chief Information Security Officer at Presidio. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government. I'm also pleased to introduce Liz Buser, AARP Senior Advisor of Fraud Prevention Programs, who will kick us off today with some insights on fraud numbers and current trending scams. Liz is a senior advisor on AARP's Fraud Prevention Programs team. In this role, she works with internal colleagues and external partners to empower consumers like us to spot and avoid scams and fraud. Prior to joining AARP in 2011, Liz spent 7 years working at the Employee Benefit Research Institute and American Savings Education Council, where she focused on retirement and savings education programs. Liz, I'm going to turn things over to you to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathleen. It's an honor to be here, and good morning, everybody. I'm just going to spend a moment, if we want to pull up those slides, talking about fraud in older adults. I'll give an overview nationwide and in Michigan, and then just talk about scammers' tactics and some of the most common scam types that are out there. Next slide, please. Fraud is really at a crisis level in this country. The Federal Trade Commission recently released their Consumer Sentinel Data Book 2023, and it shared information on the scams that were most frequently reported to them last year. And the keyword here is reported. So the findings are staggering. Last year, consumers reported losing $10 billion to scams and fraud, and that's up $1 billion from the year prior. And it's staggering because reported losses back in 2020 were $3.5 billion. Also, last year, the FTC received 2.6 million fraud reports, up slightly from the year prior, and the median loss was $500. But staggeringly, nearly 100,000 people reported losing $10,000 or more. And so I just want to touch on kind of the most frequently reported schemes last year. Imposter scams, online shopping scams, and similar scams to that. Scams involving prizes, sweepstakes, and lotteries, followed by investment scams, and then business and job opportunity scams. And there was no change between 2023 and 2022. Imposter scams were a huge problem, and reported losses for those scam types was $2.7 billion. And for the first time, email was the most common way that scammers approached their victims. And that was followed by phone calls and text messages. And scammers also love social media platforms. And the numbers you can see on the screen are just incredible. And among those who reported losing money to a scam, the biggest losses were through bank transfers and cryptocurrency. Next slide, please. The FTC also provides some state data as well. So for Michigan, the state came in 23rd in terms of fraud reports received, and total fraud reported fraud losses were nearly $152 million, with a median reported loss of $410. And identity theft was the most reported fraud category, followed by imposter scams. Next slide, please. So here's a fun fact. The AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline, which I'm sure you're familiar with, was the #1 other data contributor to the FTC's Consumer Sentinel. So last year on your screen, you'll see these are the top scams that we heard about through our fraud helpline. And you can see these are pretty similar to the government trends as well. Nearly 100,000 people contacted our free helpline last year. So and I just want to build on something that Kathleen had mentioned. Scammers are targeting us because they want our money and our sensitive personal information. So I'll talk more about the scams shortly, but that's what we're hearing about through the helpline. Next slide, please. Just want to shed some light on who scammers are targeting. We know through our consumer outreach work and through our own research at AARP that most people believe that scams only really happen to older adults. The reality is a little different, though. Younger adults actually report losing money to fraud more frequently than older adults. So again, the scammers are targeting everybody. But here's the difference. When older adults are targeted, they lose so much more money. And why is this? Well, older adults have likely saved throughout their lives. Maybe they have a pension and retirement savings, housing wealth, and even Social Security checks each month are a draw to criminals. Next slide. So I'm going to take just a few moments now to touch on the elements of a scam and the tactics that scammers use. Next slide. So first, there's generally 3 primary elements of a scam: the contact method, payment method, and scam type. Next slide. So criminals are targeting us in quite a few different ways. So first of all, of course, the telephone. We all get those scam calls, and it's certainly a hot method of contact for today's scammers. And we've all gotten those calls. These phone scams often begin with a pre-recorded robocall about some urgent matter that instructs you to stay on the line or to press a button to speak with a representative. Criminals are also targeting us through email. They are so good at making an email message look like it's coming from a trusted source, like your bank or maybe a retailer that you do business with. And the goal of the message is to instill urgency, to get you to take an action, like to click a link, call a phone number, to give them money. And they want you to do that without stepping back and considering whether the message is fraudulent. And text messages, as was mentioned before, it is one of the fastest growing contact methods for today's scammers. The scammer impersonates a familiar or trusted source to get you to act immediately to address some urgent matter. And of course, online, we all know the internet is full of fraudulent content. And criminal tactics include hacking social media accounts and sharing false information. Maybe they set up fake profiles, create legitimate looking shopping sites, you name it, the criminals are out there doing it. And of course, last but not least, there's still plenty of criminals out there targeting folks in person. For example, after natural disasters, sham utility providers or shady contractors will show up at people's doors and offer to repair damages for cash up front, but then they'll take the money and run. Next slide. So again, worth repeating, $10 billion in reported fraud losses to the FTC last year. And you can see that those that relied on us being online, combined, they're nearly triple the reported losses by phone. Nearly $3 billion lost to online scams and around $1 billion lost to phone scams. Next slide. And there's a number of ways that criminals are stealing money from people. So, credit cards, checks, peer-to-peer payment apps, gift cards, wire transfers, cryptocurrency, and even cash. And scammers love payment methods like gift cards and crypto and wire transfers because they are virtually untraceable and there's very little chance of you getting your money back. Next slide. This shows the different payment methods by losses. As you can see, more than $3.3 billion, again, was lost via bank transfers and cryptocurrency. Next slide. So that's kind of the bigger picture of fraud. So I just want to spend a moment talking about how scammers operate, and then talk about some of the most frequently reported scams. And I'm going to do this pretty quickly so we can hear what great information Dan has to say. But I do want to say the Fraud Watch Network website, I'll share the link at the end, has a ton of articles, tip sheets, videos, you name it, that talk about these different scam types. So we at AARP think about 85% of all fraud begins with three elements. You get a contact from out of the blue that gets you into a heightened emotional state, whether it's fear, panic, excitement, or love. And it comes with urgency. You must act now or else something really bad is going to happen. And usually that action is accompanied by a request for money through an unconventional payment method like crypto and gift cards, wire transfers, peer-to-peer payment apps. And what happens is these elements together produce a response from our brain's emotional center, which bypasses logical thinking. And criminals know this. So they refer to this as being getting a target under the ether, because once we are there, it is so hard to access logical thinking and the criminal succeeds. And I do want to say it is not the victim's fault. Next slide. So let's just spend the next minute or two talking about different scam types. Next slide. Government imposter scams. We have all gotten those calls from scammers impersonating Social Security, the IRS, Medicare. And many of these scams involve threats like your Social Security number has been suspended, or you owe back taxes and you're going to be arrested immediately if you don't pay me money, if you don't act now. Two things to note. One, the government doesn't contact you out of the blue about a supposed problem. And two, if you want to verify whether a government service is trying to contact you, use known and legitimate customer service numbers or email addresses. And also, the government's not going to threaten you with arrest. They're not going to send you a text message or an email or anything like that. The first way that they will reach out to you is most likely by a letter in the mail. But even scammers try to impersonate those. Next slide, please. Similar to that are business imposter scams. Again, these involve threats. Maybe The scammer's impersonating your utility company and says that your utilities will be shut off if you don't pay the bill right away. Same thing as with government imposter scams. The legitimate business won't contact you out of the blue about a supposed problem and reach out to the business directly through a legitimate phone number or email address or website if you need to reach out to them. Next slide. I think Dan's going to talk about this, so I'll just spend a second on it. But bank imposter scams are certainly trending, and we're hearing about it through the helpline. You'll get a call or text seemingly from your bank. They have information about you or your account. They'll say there's suspicious activity, and they'll connect you to the fraud department. And then the supposed fraud department will say you've been engaging in illicit activity, and they're going to send you or text you a one-time passcode to have you log in, and they're going to ask you to read it back to them for verification. But in reality, the scammer's login attempt actually triggered your bank to send you the passcode. So when you hand it over, it gives criminals full access to your account. Next slide. And we've all heard about personal relationship scams. They're so common, like grandparent scams or online romance scams. For example, in a grandparent scam, the imposter will contact you claiming to be your grandchild or another family member and tell you need to send money to help get them out of some sort of trouble. There's so many red flags with these. And again, our website has great resources to help you spot and avoid these types of scams. Next slide, please. Mailed check fraud is a problem. I know we're going to talk about that later, so I'll skip over that for now. Next slide. Another big problem that we're especially hearing about is financial grooming. What this is it involves a fake cryptocurrency trading platform. Small investments with strong returns that lead to larger investments with great returns, and so on. And when the unknowing victim tries to withdraw their earnings, they find that they can't. And their supposed friend who told them about this great opportunity disappears. And we are hearing about victims who've lost millions of dollars in this scam, and it is so devastating. And finally, the last scam I wanted to highlight is sweepstakes scams. They're another type of impersonation schemes. Who wouldn't want to go on a dream vacation or win thousands of dollars? And so what the scammers will do is try to take advantage of our eagerness by telling us, that we've won a truck or a trip or something like that. But the catch is you need to pay a fee or taxes or customs duties in order to claim your prize. And you'll send them, they want you to send them money. It's a definite red flag. So some great tips on the screen as well. Next slide. So I know I covered everything quickly, but I just want to remind folks, as fraud criminals have access to increasingly sophisticated tactics, which we're going to talk more about today, it is more important than ever to stay informed about the latest scam tactics and red flags. So I encourage you to check out our website, aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. Or if you or a loved one wants to report a scam or think you may have fallen victim, or if you just have a question about whether something is or isn't legitimate, give our helpline a call, 877-908-3360. And with that, Kathleen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Wow. I think so much of what you said has crossed across over my screens. And I know your criminal playbook is what part of that knowledge is power thing, being able to recognize that they're trying to play on your emotion. I think I had a message that there was a warrant out for my arrest because of back taxes, which I knew wasn't true. So anyway, so thank you very much. Your team has really made so much information available on AARP's Fraud Watch Network to help people and to protect their money. I hope all of our viewers get a chance to visit that website. One of my greatest fears is losing my wallet. The implications seem so much bigger today, once someone has my driver's license or my debit card or credit cards. In the old days, I used to worry about some kid going rogue with my credit card and going on a spending spree. But today the stakes are so much higher. You have to worry about somebody stealing your identity, taking out loans in your name, or using credit cards, and maybe even getting into your savings account or your 401k. So I was on the Fraud Watch Network site, and I was looking at the video tips they have on there, and I advise people to go and visit their 1-minute video tips. And I came across one that it's on what to do if you should lose your wallet. And so I thought it'd be worthwhile to share it really quickly right now. I think everybody would get a lot out of it. So let's play that video.
When your wallet goes missing, it can be incredibly stressful. Losing the cash you had is bad enough, but your credit cards and ID can be a gold mine for criminals to carry out credit card fraud and identity theft. What to do after your wallet is lost or stolen? First, cancel all your cards by calling the companies that issued them. Start with your debit card because it doesn't have as many protections as credit cards do. Next, make sure to submit a police report right away. The criminal may never get caught, but if someone tries to use your information, you have evidence of the theft. Freeze your credit. Contact each of the 3 credit reporting agencies and ask them to put a freeze on your credit report. This will prevent someone from opening up credit in your name. Here's a pro tip. You can sign up for fraud alerts on your financial accounts, and they will notify you if there's any suspicious activity. For more tips, go to aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork.
I hope that was valuable to everybody. It's definitely valuable to me. I also read on the website that you should limit the number of credit cards you have in your wallet, just for that purpose. It should get stolen. So these kinds of tips are what we all need to protect our identity and to protect our money. And that leads us to our next speaker, cybersecurity expert Dan Lohrmann, who has his finger on the pulse of banking fraud crimes and how we can protect ourselves. And once Dan is done, we will start taking questions from the audience. I see there are many, many coming in, and we will get to them. So Dan, let's turn it over to you.
Hey, Kathleen, great to see you again. Thanks so much. It's great to be with you and Liz. It's some great tips there by Liz and some comments. I'm just going to go about 10 minutes with some of the hot things that are happening right now around the country and really around the world. So how to protect your money from bank scams in 2024. You can go to the first slide. I just want to start off by many of you, I'm sure, have heard about phishing. Phishing is something that's been around for a couple decades. When I was CISO for the state of Michigan, we were talking about phishing 2 decades ago, but it's gotten so much more sophisticated. We're going to talk about how that's changing with AI, with artificial intelligence. But there are, many to maybe review for some of you, but phishing is just people who are trying to get your information. And as you just heard, from Liz, there's it can be obviously via email. It's the most common way. It can look very sophisticated. They can even appear to be coming from your bank or a trusted organization that you work with, but it's not really coming from them. So there's tips on how to detect a phish. What's that from line? Who's it coming from? But there's also spear phishing, very targeted on you. They appear to have very specific information about you, and whaling is going after the big fish, business email compromise, as Liz mentioned, where they have detailed information, maybe even having an existing relationship with you. And they're using that information to get you to give them information. And I think this is the most common way this happens each and every day. I'm literally getting phish multiple times a week, and most of them are getting filtered out. Go to the next slide. I want to just emphasize a few aspects of this with AI that are kind of new and hot. Wyoming, I know a lot of you are in Michigan today, but this is just one from the FBI report. We'll have this link. You can watch this later, but go to the FBI report that talks about crime across the country. $14 million just last year in AI scams in Wyoming. So you get some examples of that. Next slide. Just what are they doing? What's different about this? Well, it's impersonation of trusted users. It's faster and more effective. Sophisticated attacks are often difficult to detect. And again, phishing, there's a term we use called vishing, which is video or phone deep fake video conference convinces employee to send 25 million to scammers. So a lot of times, you'll get a phone call and it appears to be from someone that either or it may be the voice sounds like someone or they claim that someone is available, and here they are. I'm going to put them on the phone real quick, that kind of a thing. And in reality, it's not. So one of the things I'll tell you right out of the out of the gate. If you suspect that something seems out of ordinary, you need to verify it. You need to have methods that you can reach out. People talk about a family word that you use to know this is legitimate within the family, or with friends. But you need to go out of band and verify that what you're being asked to do is actually legitimate. Next slide. So some examples of that. We talk about banking scams. Anyone, you just heard some of this, so some of this is going to be repetitive from what Liz was saying, but somebody reaching out to you and saying, I'm from your bank, what's your account number? Well, just think for a moment. Again, your bank knows your account number, and they're not going to call you and ask for that or ask for your password. Or they may try to install some malware in the device, or have you do something you wouldn't normally do out of the ordinary. So again, when you're being contacted, and you heard that, a common one right now I'm hearing is around very, very common with all the headlines and the news about forgiveness of student loans. So when something big breaks in the news, it could be a hurricane hits Florida, or someone's raising money for something. Something out of your big news about loan forgiveness, and then all of a sudden you get an unsolicited phone call or email asking you to do something and it's going to expire tomorrow, or that kind of thing. Oftentimes that's a red flag. It's a scam. So be very, very cautious and you saw those elements from Liz earlier, the urgency, something that's hot in the news, somebody who's reaching out to you from an untrusted source. Next slide. So what are some common ways people do that? Bank scammers will target you with fake checks, send fake checks that legally bind you to something. All you need to do is sign it and then cash it or do something related to that fake check. Spam emails, we all get spam all the time, but even they're becoming much, much more sophisticated. We can certainly turn, like I use a wide variety of different government and company sources. Maybe some of you may use Yahoo or Gmail and you have spam being filtered, but stuff is still getting through that appears legitimate. Oftentimes it has links in it asking you to click, which is could trigger a download of malware or something bad. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes they just ask you to call a phone number or reply because they know that you're looking for links. So it doesn't have to contain links to be a fish that's trying to impersonate you, trying to impersonate the bank, saying we need this information, we need you to do something. And oftentimes dark web, buy your banking information on the dark web. And I saw some questions on that. We'll walk through some ways you can counteract that and protect yourself. Next slide. So what are some top tips from Stay Safe Online? You saw a great list, and I really appreciate all the great work that AARP is doing, Kathleen and Liz, and you can certainly go to their helpline. StaySafeOnline.org is another great organization that has top tips. I could spend 10 minutes on each of these, but just real high level, these are some things that you do these 10 things, you will be in a much better, much safer position with your computers and your smartphones and your information. So keeping your machine clean, making sure that you have updated, not just one and done, but updated AV, antivirus protection and software that you can use, whether it be from Norton or McAfee, or there's a wide variety of other companies that provide that so keeps viruses and malware off your machines. Using unique passwords, not reusing passwords. A password manager, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but it can be very, very helpful so you don't remember your passwords, and can help you with keeping your passwords unique, but also making them easily accessible. Enabling multi-factor authentication. That's the two-step, where they send you a text or they send you an email with a PIN code to verify that it is in fact you. Very, very important. And we talked about earlier the example Liz gave, where they're trying to defeat that now too. So if anybody ever says, "Hey, I'm going to send you a code," and then you read it back to me, oftentimes they're trying to defeat your multi-factor authentication. But by and large, having multi-factor authentication, having that two steps with a PIN code with bank accounts is essential to make sure that you're not that somebody does get your password, they can't get into your account because they have to have that second factor, that PIN or that email. Report phishing. Think before you click. We've been saying that for years, but really make sure if you think that perhaps an email or an unsolicited is coming in, you weren't expecting it. Either I advise you, if you really think it's legitimate, call them independently from the email. Don't call the number in the message. Look it up yourself and call the bank directly. Call the organization you're working with directly, whether that be Venmo or some other organization. Doing this by using the information in the email, you're going right to where their help desk is, and it's probably fraudulent. Back up your data. I can't say this enough. If you were to get a ransomware attack, or somebody encrypts your information and they want money to get it back, so it's called ransomware. Having a good backup is so important, and doing that on a regular basis. And then check your settings. You're going to hear about this in a wide variety of different apps you may have on your phone or that you run on your PCs, your laptops. Use the security settings that are most secure, that are provided by the company like Facebook or LinkedIn or Yahoo or Google. Utilize the settings that they offer that are secure, and then share with care. Be careful who you're sending emails to. Go on to the next slide. There's a lot of different pop quiz here. Change it up here for a second. I know we got just a couple minutes here before we want to take some of your questions, but I ask you this: when was the last time you backed up your home PC with your most important data? That might be your tax information. We just had tax day, or your home pictures, your family. Same thing with your smartphone. When was that last backed up? If you were to lose your phone, if you were, obviously to somehow get hacked and somebody was able to lock your information when a ransomware attack or something, having a good backup is really, really important. So same thing with your work laptop, desktop. Some companies will back up stuff that go to the corporate servers, but they won't back up what's on your laptop, even though it's provided by them. They may not be backing up your home PC, your work laptop. So making sure you have good backups is really, really important. And I have a blog that I do for Government Technology Magazine. It's govtech.com. And then you can go, and there's a lot of details on how you can do good backups and be effective at that. Next slide. Almost done here. We're going to take some of your questions in a moment. I know we get a lot of questions around Venmo. Can you use apps like Venmo securely? And I certainly think the answer to that is yes. But generally, the default settings that you get with some of these payment apps are not ideal for privacy and security. So adding multi-factor authentication, adding 2 steps or an additional step, basically will provide an additional layer of security that you really should have on your accounts. Keep payments private. I know Venmo and a number of other payment services allow you to have public, so everybody can see like who you're sending money to. There's no reason to have that public. So keep your payments private. Hide your friends. Again, social media allows it very easy to share things publicly. Some things you want to share publicly. If you're in a business and like LinkedIn, I use LinkedIn a lot. And what I share in LinkedIn is public information because it's for my work and I want people to know about it. But for private things, you keep it private. So make sure you're checking your data, the accounts you're sending to. Is it really who you think it's from? You can even use a QR code to make sure you're sending money to the right place. And I think oftentimes that can be helpful. Don't leave money sitting in your account. You can transfer it over to your banks, or others don't just leave it sitting in Venmo or other payment methods. And then be aware of scams. And this is a list here of just some of the different types of scams that people will use. Fake prize money, calls from Venmo. They don't call you, asking you questions, text messages pretending to be from Venmo. You see the list of other ways, scams here. Strangers posing as a friend, offers to make money fast, paper check scams, romance scams. These are all common scams that we see, and Venmo is a common way that people want payment. So PC Magazine and a wide variety of other security magazines do have details on how to use Venmo safely. We go to the next slide. I think that might be the end there, Kathleen. I think that's my last slide. So I think we can jump back to maybe show all of us in full screen, and we can go to some audience questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciated your online security tips. I hope at some point we can talk a little bit about Facebook, because that seems like it's a gateway to,
Yeah.
jewelry. So anyways, we do have many questions. A couple of questions came in about the dark web, one from Mary and one from Leslie. Mary says she's been told her info is on the dark web. What should we do? And I know Leslie had a similar question. What do you do once? Well, first of all, can you explain what the dark web is? And what do you do if your information is on there? And how do you know if your information is on there?
Yeah, great questions. I'll start, then Liz, you can jump in as well. I'll just give a couple of the answers. I think the dark web, it's a part of the internet. It's all, we all have used the internet each and every day. It's a part of the internet that it tends to be servers hackers use on a regular basis to transfer information, usually encrypted. There are portals that hackers, that bad actors on the internet. These are not, they don't use the word hacker. It's cyber criminals. Really, they are the cyber criminals and nation state, actors. Use these websites to share information with each other, almost in the same way that help desks share information for us, for like airlines or for banks and things like that. So the dark web is a part of the internet that cyber criminals use to gather and share information, share data that's stolen. There are a wide variety of ways. There are different services that'll tell you. Even from Google, you see this from a number of identity theft protection websites and services will say, and I've seen even more credit cards actually will offer. I'm not going to start naming them, but MasterCard, Visa, Discover, American Express will send you and allow you to sign up for, is your information on the dark web. They'll actually do, in many cases, let's say free services, but you have a credit card with them or you have a bank account with them, they will actually do that search for you. So I would ask your existing trusted keyword here, partners that you already use to help you find, is my information out there? But there's credit theft protection. I certainly have that, and I have a number of different ones that are available to me, but we often get offered those after there's been an identity theft, there's been a data breach. A bank sends you, hey, 1 year free credit protection, and or sometimes it's 2 years or more because there's been a data breach. And they go in and they track and they look for your information on the dark web, utilizing a trusted service. You mentioned a couple of them earlier. I know, Liz, you can walk through them. And they can help you actually get that information removed, get that information, and there's a variety of different services that will actually help you. Again, I use a keyword here. Make sure it's a trusted provider, because because people know this is out there, the criminals will actually try and impersonate. I'll help you get your data off the dark web. And how do you know you're even dealing with a trusted provider? So there's a few tips, Liz. I'm sure you have some more.
Those are some incredible tips, Dan, and I've learned so much from you today. So thrilled to be here with you. I think one thing I wanted to mention is there's a great article on the AARP website. It's from 2018, but the information's still relevant. It's called "Is My Identity on the Dark Web?" And it sheds insight into the dark web and what goes on there. In case folks are interested, I wanted to mention that. Just to build on what Dan mentioned, I think it's a good time to remind folks of how there's a lot you can do, most of which Dan said, to protect yourself against identity theft. So Dan touched on it. You can add a fraud alert to your credit reports, and that requires a lender to contact you before opening a new account in your name. And for that, you just need to contact one of the 3 credit bureaus, and those are Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, and then the others will follow. So that's one thing. As Dan said, you can choose to freeze your credit. What a credit freeze does is it blocks lenders from opening new accounts in your name, and you can freeze and unfreeze your reports at no cost. But you need to do that with each of the 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. Another tip, just in general, use strong and unique passwords. I know a couple of questions came in about password managers. They're a great tool for setting and safely storing passwords. A couple out there are Bitwarden. I think there's LastPass, Dashlane, and there's others. And then set up electronic access to all of your financial accounts. You can set up so that you get alerts to text you with each transaction so you can track activity and other alerts. The apps do have a lot of encryption. And that way you can, go through your activity in real time. There's been quite a few times that in our household, we've noticed fraudulent transactions appear in our accounts, and we've reached out to the credit card company and the banks and that. And just one more thing that I think that Dan said is so important. Do your research. The scammers are impersonating, legitimate companies. They're impersonating the federal government. Do your research before you, do any financial transaction or anything like that. It's so important to know that who you're working with is legitimate.
Thank you so much. Jean asked a follow-up question to this about the costs of freezing your credit reports and the cost of getting those alerts from the credit reporting agencies. I mean, I believe I was able to do it for free. I don't know if there's a fee for the alerts part, but I don't know if you guys happen to know the answer to that or not.
Should be free.
Yes.
I mean, it is. And I mean, all of them offer, a lot of them, I say all of them, most of them will offer additional services for an additional cost. So a lot of times you can get copies of your credit report for free. I think was it free, Liz, you probably know better than like freecreditreport.com or something like that.
Annualcreditreport.com.
There you go. Annualcreditreport.com has it. Thank you. And then if you want extra, copies from different, agencies, they're going to charge you extra potentially. And there are also additional services. But, the other thing I tell people is when you get that letter, we all get them. It seems like we get them, sadly, multiple times a year, at least one I've gotten for my family members, at least one in the last 3 or 4 years from some bank that's had a data breach or some organization that's had a data breach. When you get that letter, you need to make sure you sign up, and that's free for 1 year or 2 years or whatever they're offering. But some people think they automatically get that. You actually have to, follow the instructions on that letter to sign up for that free service. And I notice many people don't actually follow through. And so they're not getting that free credit protection service because of that data breach.
That's good advice. Thank you. I get those all the time, so thank you. All right, so we have something from Karen, and this is something I worry about too. She worries about scams where they deep fake your voice and face and generate your words. And I know that I get phone calls I don't recognize, and I've heard that it takes just 15 seconds of your voice for them to replicate it and use it. Is this really something we should be worried about? Is this really happening? Are you guys hearing this?
Yeah, let me start, and then Liz, you feel free to jump in. I mean, I will say the answer is it is real. It's more rare right now today as we're talking in April 2024. This is being recorded. It's not as common as most people think today. I do believe it is going to become more and more common. There are tools that can do this. I've seen tools demoed that generally use more than 15 seconds. They typically take a minute or two, but they can pull down your information off of like differently YouTube videos. People, Liz and I and you, Kathleen, are in public a lot. People can take that information and can impersonate you. So I do think the threat is real. I think it's growing. And I think with generative AI becoming more and more popular and more widespread and the tools getting better and better, unfortunately, the bad guys are getting better and better as well. And so, this is going to be an ongoing challenge. So I do think it's legitimate. I think there's a number of things you need to do. From a common perspective for all of us, verify the information. Back to what we said before. Somebody's saying something, you said, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like Dan. If you, Kathleen, if you hear somebody saying that's Dan, it doesn't, he's telling me to go to my bank and type in these numbers and do it. Why would Dan tell me to do that? Text, contact the person directly, find out. Many families have a safe word that they use that they've trusted in advance, or they've set up some kind of procedure and they thereby they can verify that is this really coming from you. I've talked to people that thought that somebody had been in jail. Don't tell mom and dad, send me some money. Those, and they've been around for several years. I'm in London. Don't tell my parents I got arrested. Can you send me $5,000 or whatever. And then the person was literally not even in London. They were still at home and they were standing right next to. So they called and they said, "Well, I don't want to turn my granddaughter in." So they texted their daughter and they said, "Is it's not the person's name, but is Sarah in London right now?" "No, she's standing right next to me. We're making dinner." It's like, so, I mean, there are things you can do from a common sense perspective to verify when stuff like that comes up. And Liz, you may have some additional tips.
I was going to say, exactly what you said, Dan, though, of course, you have the much deeper tech knowledge than me. We're really starting to get the word out at AARP about how scammers are using AI technology, like the voice mimicking software, the deep fake videos, and chatbots like ChatGPT, how the criminals are using that to impersonate real people. So, like your grandchild, as you were mentioning, Dan, scammers are impersonating police officers. We've even heard about scammers impersonating, our spouses. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And, when you get a phone call, if you don't recognize the number, first of all, don't answer it. If you get a phone call that's weird and you happen to answer it, just hang up the phone. And as Dan said, reach out to your family member, make sure that they're okay. What the scammers are counting on is that their unexpected communication to you will trigger intense emotions and involve urgency. And then they're going to want you to take the action, as we said. Like in most cases, it'll be to pay money. And so just keeping that in mind and knowing how to spot the red flags can help us to protect ourselves better, even as scammers are using AI technology to perpetrate these crimes.
Thank you for that. Liz, there's a question from Eric, and I'm wondering if ARP might have tips for this. He's asking, is it a bad idea to stay logged on to Facebook and also belonging to groups on Facebook? I'm hoping that there's some advice that ARP or maybe Dan could provide too. We're seeing people on people's posts, they're getting hacked. I just saw one recently where somebody had something that said, "Oh, I didn't know he died," and there was a link. And if you click on that link, then you're, hacked too, basically. So are there any tips that you can give, especially for Eric's question there about staying logged onto Facebook?
Sure. I can touch on it just from my personal experience, and then I'm sure Dan will add on to it. Whenever I'm on social media, when I'm done with it, I do, log out. That's my first tip. And then links, you just mentioned, Kathleen, the scam that I've seen so many times. It's super vague. Like when someone's Facebook account has been hacked, I can't believe this happened, or, oh, we'll miss so-and-so, and then it'll have a link. And when you click on the link, that's when bad things happen. So I think in general, just be wary when you're on social media and you see links. I don't click on any links that appear to be vague and are not from legitimate sources, like a legitimate newspaper or something like that. I just kind of steer clear of the links. Facebook Messenger is also problematic, especially if somebody reaches out to you through Messenger and it's either a stranger and they message you, just kind of block that and delete the message. Or if you get a weird request from somebody that's, you're connected to on Facebook, but it sounds weird, or maybe they're asking for money or want you to click on a suspicious link, just don't do that. So I think in general, just know how to spot the tactics that scammers are using. There's a great tip sheet on the Fraud Watch Network website about staying safe online and on social media. And I think, just as for the Facebook groups, even if a group, for example, there's a parent group for my stepdaughter's college, and you have to answer a bunch of questions to get in the group, and then the admin admits you. scammers can still get into those groups. So, you have to be wary of those groups as well, especially if somebody is selling something or asking you to maybe fill out a survey that, asks for personal information. I think just know how to stay vigilant, keep your guard up, and just go with your gut too.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick on that, Kathleen. And I related to what you just said also from Jack, the question came in, how do we know that the letter that says you've been told about a breach is genuine? And I would just say a couple things on this, and who do you trust and how do you know who to trust? First of all, in general, not always, but in general, stuff that you get through the U.S. mail, like mail fraud, the bad actors don't generally like to use U.S. mail. I mean, not saying they never do, because they do, but the reason is this: mail fraud, it costs them a lot more because they got to literally send the letter. So it's a lot cheaper to send 1 million, spam messages and hope that some percentage of them get through via email. So email is a much more common technique used by the bad guys than U.S. mail. Not saying you can't get fraud in the mail, but if it's with the bank letterhead, I mean, obviously that could be faked as well. But then I say, so I get a letter, it says Flagstar Bank or whatever, had a data breach, which actually did happen, and so you can verify it online, do your own research. There's ways to go back out. You can actually call the bank itself, which is the best thing to do. We're talking about bank fraud. Call the bank. I received this letter in the U.S. mail, and it says that this was, yada, yada, yada. And again, if you follow those steps, I'm not going to say you're ever going to say 100%, because 100% but 99% of the time you're going to be able to stop that. 99.9 literally, because you're going to have a letter, you've called the bank's verified it, you verified it online, there was a Flagstar data breach, this is legitimate, I can go ahead and set up this credit protection.
And if I could just build on that, just if you get something in the mail or you see something online and you want a second opinion as to whether something is or isn't legitimate, call the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline. We have hundreds of trained staff and volunteers who can answer your call and help you determine whether something is or isn't legitimate. And if you've fallen victim to a scam, they can help walk you through the steps you can take to report it and to protect yourself against future victimization.
That's great.
Can we talk real quickly about credit card readers? Like when you go and you're getting your gasoline at the gas station, we're hearing that there could be like fake devices attached there. Is it better to scan your card than insert it? And should you not be using a debit card when you are out shopping or getting gas? Should you be using a credit card instead? I mean, what's the most secure way to protect yourself?
I'll start, then Liz, you can jump in. I mean, personally, we mentioned a couple things earlier. I use credit cards. I don't use debit cards. There's a wide variety of protections. You can do a whole show just on the benefits of credit versus debit, but some people don't like that. With the chip, at the, go to Costco, the chip reader, out. That to me generally is the way that I prefer to use from a security perspective. And then I would just emphasize this again. We said it several times. Go through your bills every month, read through, somehow somebody gets your information with your credit cards or your debit card, whatever you have, go through and you need to look at every line. You need to look at, did I make that charge? Did I buy that, whatever it is at McDonald's, and it doesn't have to be, well, I just look at this up $100 or above or that kind of a thing, because, a lot of times the bad guys will go for $826. Because they can do that on a repeated basis every month, and they'd actually like the lower number because it's, if it says $7,000, you flew to Paris, you're probably going to catch that, right? That's going to get flagged. But the little amounts of money may not get flagged. So go through your credit statement every month, your credit card or debit statement every month. Those are just some tips, Liz.
Absolutely. I go through ours. It might be overkill, but each day.
Okay. I don't do it every day. I do it about once a week. I
just eagle eye, because I figure the sooner you identify it, the sooner you can report it and work with your financial institution, like your credit card company or your bank.
Sure.
So, but maybe that's just me being neurotic, hazard of the job. Personally, I like to tap my card rather than inserting it. Since it's less likely to be copied or hacked, then I know there's all sorts of technology that Dan can probably shed light into. And then I also like to use, if I'm at the grocery store, for example, like I'll use like Apple Pay or Google Pay or something like that, and use that to scan, since that they don't actually send your number or anything like that. And then one thing I wanted to mention earlier too is for any financial transaction in general. Let me backtrack. When I leave our house, I go off of Wi-Fi. I turn the Wi-Fi off on my phone. Yeah. And if I'm in public or staying at a hotel or something like that, I make sure to use a VPN. I'm sure we probably got a question or two about that. If I'm connected to public Wi-Fi, I won't do any financial transactions. So taking simple steps like that can also help with some of the overall ways that you can stay safe.
Okay. Great. Yeah, that gets into a whole other area too of banking apps, if we should be using those. Yeah. And how do you know the Wi-Fi you're using is secure? To be using your banking app on your phone. That could be a whole show in itself, right?
Absolutely. And the encryption, if you're the main tip I would give people out of the gate is make sure you're utilizing whatever apps you're using, whether that be with, on your phone, on your cell phone, or on a laptop. Make sure you're utilizing the security that's built into that as it is. And people even ask me about IoT devices, smart thermostats in their homes and everything. Change that default password that comes with the, to turn on multi-factor authentication. If and when it's available, and usually with apps it is available. So make sure you're utilizing the full security that comes with these apps when you have them out of the gate. Also, I just mentioned one other thing that I want to mention, Liz. I know we're almost out of time here, but the challenge of, we talk about verifying your information every month. The good news is many of these credit cards will have zero liability on them. So if it's a fraudulent charge on your Discover card or on your MasterCard, you go back and you identify that certainly within 90 days, 60 days, but I've seen up to 90 days. If you identify it, you will not be liable for that charge. So again, verifying your information and your data, no matter what you're doing, is key.
And Kathleen, if I can mention one thing, a lot of the topics we talked about today are actually going to be addressed in a webinar that AARP is hosting. I think it's May 9th. So cryptocurrency, AI, protecting your accounts and whatnot. So I encourage people to keep an eye out for an email from AARP about that, and check out the Fraud Watch Network website because it will be promoted there.
Thank you. We definitely can't get through everything in an hour. There's so many questions. There two women did ask questions about password managers, so I don't want to let that fall off the table. But so as if you could respond to that quickly, what is a password manager? But then also in closing, I was hoping that each of you could just tell us the one thing that keeps you up at night personally when it comes to fraud.
I'll start, and then Liz, maybe you can wrap it. I think it's moving so fast. So if something seems out of the ordinary that you weren't expecting, one thing Liz just mentioned did happen to us in our house in the last week. We were selling something on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody who wanted to buy our dishwasher, actually it was a washer and dryer we were selling at our house, sent in, said, we want to buy it, but it was we want to make sure this is a legitimate sale. So will you you mentioned this, Liz, we're going to text you a number, and then you text it back to us, or we're going to send you a notice. And it was basically doing exactly what you just said. It was trying to get our defeat multi-factor authentication. Now that one instance, I knew when we were ready. My wife and I didn't fall for it. Thank God we were ready for it. But things like that are new, that are different, that are constantly changing. If something seems out of the ordinary, why does somebody want to? I'm trying to sell my washing machine. Why is somebody trying to get me to do X, Y, Z? Stop, think. call the 800 helpline, ask a question, go get help, because it's moving so fast. There's new things coming out all the time. That's my number one challenge. Liz?
To go, and great challenges and tips you've given today, Dan. To go back to your question, Kathleen, about Password Manager, it's really it's a software app or a browser-based service that it stores your passwords securely, and it'll even generate strong passwords for you. Most of them have a cost. Bottom line, I think, is do your research, and we do have some information on the FraudWatch Network website about that. So what keeps me up at night, I think, is the emotional impact of fraud victimization. The financial impact is devastating, but for so many, the emotional impact is even more devastating. And we hear so many gut-wrenching stories through the FraudWatch Network helpline, through our fraud support group. People feel like it's their fault. They think they're dumb. They think they're stupid, and they're blaming themselves when in reality, the blame lies with the criminal. So helping people to understand that it's not the victim's fault is what keeps me up at night. I do want to mention one thing, just kind of to reiterate. If you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. We've talked today about how you can, if you can spot it, you can stop it. And research has shown if you know about a specific scam, you are 80% less likely to engage with the scammer. And if you do engage, you are 40% less likely to fall victim. And so take a look at the information out there that Michigan provides, that everybody provides, and just know what to look out for to protect yourselves and your loved ones.
Thank you both so much. This has been a fast hour, and it's been so helpful. We could do this probably for 2 more hours and still not get through everything. So again, as was mentioned, AARP has a wealth of information on its Fraud Watch Network to help you stay on top of trending scams and tips to protect your money. So please check it out. Thank you again. Thank you to our speakers, Dan and Liz. We really appreciate you. Hopefully we'll see you again at another event. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.